people are upset that she didn't preserve the look of the Disney classic of Snow White, of white skin, right? That's what this movie's about, her having snow white skin. So the way that I would fix that, right? Because acting is about, you're not the character, right? You're embodying a character. You as the actor are going to take on this character. You're not actually the actor. You're not actually the character. You're going to take it on. So how would I fix that? Very, very, very simple. If they were so dead set in casting Rachel Zegler, which they were, you fix that in the way that Tim Burton did the makeup on Johnny Depp for Sweeney Todd, right? No one cares, right? They made him look like very pale. They also did it in Dark Shadows, right? Edward Scissorhands. They made him very pale. No one cares. If they want to preserve the look of the original, just make her look like the character. You can make anybody look like anybody. Robert Downey Jr. played an African American in Tropic Thunder. You can make anyone look like anyone. They should have just used their special effects, and no one would have cared. So I just got done watching Disney's Snow White, starring Rachel Zegler and Gal Gadot. And let me tell you that her ethnicity and her skin tone was the least of their problems. The film absolutely lacked direction, it lacked vision, and it lacked storytelling. And I'm gonna teach you what I would do to save this film if I had the opportunity to do that. All right, so one of the biggest problems that most people had were the 7 dwarfs, them being CG. Here's what I would have done to fix that problem. Okay, so I'm sure that you've seen Lord of the Rings, right, with Elijah Wood, right, as a hobbit, and how he was much smaller compared to everyone else in the film, right? This was done by different techniques. One of the things was forced perspective, where one of the characters, like Gandalf, would be closer to the camera and he would be further away, and they would have different props near Elijah built smaller, so it created the illusion that he was smaller. So I think that they should have done this with actual actors instead of CGI dwarfs, because these creations that they did, they looked like some sort of evil garden gnome or some sort of like leprechaun mix that you see in a horror movie. These things were creepy. Like, they tried to make them like humanistic. How I would fix that is cast real actors, all right, give them a chance to, I know there was a lot of backlash with Peter Dinklage in terms of, are we still doing that shit, casting dwarfs for these roles? The way we could have fixed that is you just cast other actors. They don't have to be dwarfs. We shrink them down in post, all right? Fix it in post, as I'd say. Another issue that people were having is that Gal Gadot was noticeably, in many people's opinion, more attractive than Rachel Zegler. So I'm going to push back on that. Not on who's better looking, but I'm going to push back on, if you take the classic Evil Queen, right? She was still pretty, even though we're talking about cartoons here, but she was still pretty. She wasn't like an Ursula type character, okay? So I think that casting Gal Gadot in that role, it was fine. It wasn't about the look. I think it was more about the acting that was the problem, in terms of there was a lot of they forced her to appear evil. All right, now I think that comes off as weak acting, right? Because if it looked like she was forcing herself to be evil, then that goes on weak acting. So I don't think that necessarily the casting was the bad part. But what they could have done is they could have aged her up a little bit, maybe using some special effects. This way it's more believable that she's not the fairest of them all. Another way I would have fixed it is just simply recast. You didn't need to have Gal Gadot there. You could have, you know who would have been perfect, in my opinion? They should have cast Demi Moore, because she just got done making The Substance, which was a story about a fading star who was chasing youth. And this is a very similar theme to Snow White. So I think that would have been a great opportunity to have recast the role to Demi Moore. Let's just take Rachel's ethnicity and skin tone aside, which, by the way, I don't know if anybody noticed it, but they did, by they I mean Disney, did do a little bit of color grading, and they lightened her up a little bit, so to speak, which was unnecessary. But what I think, as far as casting her for this role, is that she just looked too young for it. She looked like she was a 12-year-old girl, and that, I think that a lot that had to do with that was the costume was atrocious. It was absolutely dreadful. And I've been doing a lot of work in Jack Sparrow costuming, so I know a thing or two about costumes, and just the way that fit was terrible. They should get the costume department and fire them all, because they did an absolute travesty throwing her in that dress, especially with the droopy shoulders. Like, they weren't like perky at all. They were literally droopy, like making her appear just like a sad, feeble character the whole time, which didn't match. It doesn't match her persona. It's not flattering at all either. And also the hairstyle. They should fire them as well. Her hairstyle was very flat. Like, if you look at the original, or even just if you go to the parks and you see the actors playing Snow White, they have the wigs on that have some body to the hair, right? A little bit of movement and some waves in there. Her hair was literally just parted and flat, and then it did this weird tuck. Now, back on the costume, the way that it was cut, proportion-wise, it made her torso look like it was about 2 inches tall. They like I said, whoever was in charge of the costuming here did a very, very bad job, especially in the waist part. I don't know if they were trying to make it like a corset or something like that, but it looked like it was like a solid piece of cardboard with no flexibility when she moved. It was just like almost like like the original Batman, where he had like a solid rib piece. It was terrible, absolutely terrible. It didn't even look like a real dress. It looks like they cut fabric and glued it onto some sort of cardboard or like plastic tube, like you put around a dog's neck, and then slapped it around her. That's what her dress looked like, which is a big part of the brand of these Disney movies, like especially the princess, is their dress. It's a big part of it. It's a big part of the IP, and it failed miserably there as well. How would I fix that? Easy. You fire the team, bring a new team in. Hairstylists, if they signed off on that hair and they signed off on those dresses like that, then they shouldn't be in the position that they're in, because we all know at a $250 million budget, they're well overpaid. And at that point, it just feels like they didn't care. If they signed off on that shit, they should be fired.